Okay, so let's dive into this. You sent over this stack of articles, research, notes, and wow, the story they tell is pretty big. Agriculture seems to be going through this massive shift.
It really is. Moving away from, the chemical heavy stuff that defined so much of the last century.
Right, the Green Revolution, huge yield boosts,
Huge
absolutely.
boost, yeah. But powered largely by synthetics. And, well, those methods came with some significant environmental baggage, health questions.
And now it feels like sustainability concerns are really changing the game. It's more than just like a niche thing now.
Oh, definitely. The sources really highlight this. The whole organics in, chemicals out idea, it's becoming a major force, economically, even regulatorily.
But what's striking looking through this material is that it's not about going back to, old-fashioned farming.
Not at all. It's actually super sophisticated, science-driven, taking cues from nature itself. The focus is shifting towards these things called biologicals.
Biologicals. Okay. So that's our mission for this deep dive then. Unpack what these sources say, what biologicals are, why they're suddenly booming, the science behind it.
And what it all means for how we grow food.
Yeah, perfect. So let's start right there. What are biologicals based on this research?
Well, the definition is pretty broad, actually. They're essentially products derived from living things. So think plants, microbes.
Microbes like bacteria and fungi.
Exactly. And even some more unexpected sources. One article mentioned spider venom being explored.
Spider venom. Seriously. Wow. Okay, not what comes to mind first.
Hey, probably not. But the key thing, the sources stress this, is that we're not talking simple inputs here. This is complex science applied to natural systems.
Right. High tech meets nature.
Precisely. And while this boom feels new, the basic idea isn't completely novel. The bacterium Bacillus thuringiensis beet is a good early example mentioned.
Oh, beet. Yeah, that rings a bell. I feel like I've heard about that in farming for ages.
You probably have. It produces a protein toxic to specific insects, a natural insecticide, basically.
Okay.
What's interesting is how that mechanism got adopted, the gene for that protein. It was engineered into corn and cotton decades ago.
So conventional farming was already using a biological tool just via genetic engineering.
Exactly. It shows the lines can blur, nature's defenses harnessed differently.
Okay, so if Bride's been around, what's behind this explosive growth the sources keep mentioning now? Sounds like serious money is flowing in.
Oh, absolutely. Billions in investment. Startups, big ag companies, everyone's getting in. It signals a real strategic shift.
And the market numbers reflect that.
They do. The estimate for this year, 2024, is around 14.2 billion US dollars globally for biologicals.
Okay, 14 billion, that's already substantial.
But it's the projection that's really eye-opening. Expected to hit something like 36.4 billion by 2033.
Wow, that's more than doubling in less than a decade.
Yeah, it's a compound annual growth rate over 10%. North America is the biggest market now, but Europe is expected to grow fastest.
So what's fueling that? What did the sources say are the main drivers behind that kind of growth?
There are a few key things pushing it. First, big-time regulatory pressure. Governments are really pushing sustainability.
Any specific examples?
Yeah, the EU's farm-to-fork strategy is a major one. Aims for a 50% cut in chemical pesticide use by 2030.
50%, that's ambitious.
It is. And here in the U.S., the EPA seems to be speeding up approvals for biopesticides. One report said they cut review times by 40% this year.
Okay, so governments are definitely creating an incentive to find alternatives.
A strong incentive, yeah. Then the second driver is consumer demand. Pretty clear trend there. People want organic, sustainably grown food.
And the organic market itself is huge, right?
Massive. Globally, it was, 136.4 billion euros in 2023? The U.S. is the biggest chunk of that, about 59 billion euros.
So consumers are voting with their wallets, basically.
Directly. That preference translates straight into demand for inputs like biologicals to align with that.
Okay, regulation, consumer demand. That's the pull. What about the push? Are we just better at finding these things now? Nature's incredibly complex.
That's the third driver. Exactly. Technology. The breakthroughs are making biologicals more effective, more stable, easier to actually use on the farm.
What kind of tech?
Things like microbial genomics, understanding the DNA of these microbes, synthetic biology, better ways to formulate the products so they last longer or work better, and integrating them with precision ag tools, sensors, machine learning.
Makes sense. But you mentioned complexity. The sources use this analogy, finding a needle in a haystack.
A microbial haystack, yeah.
Huh.
Think about soil. A single gram of soil can have billions of microbes. Billions.
Billions in a gram. Okay, yeah. Hard to wrap your head around.
So finding that one specific bacterium or fungus that does exactly what you need, protects against a pest, helps the plant absorb nutrients. It's incredibly challenging, like that needle analogy, but maybe even harder.
So how do companies tackle that? It sounds like a huge undertaking.
It requires massive screening efforts. The sources mentioned endodynamic as an example. They isolate and test thousands upon thousands of microbial strains from soils all over the world.
How many thousands are we talking?
Well, the notes you had specifically mentioned, they tested 18,000 bacterial strains just in their early work.
18,000. Just bacteria. That gives you a sense of the scale needed.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And through that kind of rigorous screening, they find microbes that can help manage insects, weeds, fungi, and others that just promote healthier plant growth.
Promoting growth. Like fertilizers.
Sort of, but different. That brings us to types of biologicals. Endodynamic, for example, they have products targeting pests, sure, but they've also made big strides in what are called biostimulants. Their AG3 products were mentioned.
Biostimulants. Okay, what makes them different from, say, synthetic fertilizer?
So traditional fertilizers just dump raw nutrients, nitrogen, phosphorus, onto the plant, right? Feed it directly. Biostimulants work more subtly. They use natural substances, maybe seaweed extracts, plant peptides, things like that, to enhance the plant's own internal processes.
Ah, so it's like boosting the plant's natural abilities, helping it help itself.
Exactly. Improving how efficiently it takes up nutrients that are already in the soil, increasing its tolerance to stress, like drought or heat, just optimizing its overall health. It's less about force feeding, more about fine-tuning the plant's own system.
And those AG3 products you mentioned, they're certified organic.
They are, yeah, which is significant.
Why is that?
Because, as the sources pointed out, it's not just organic farmers adopting these things anymore. Conventional farmers are increasingly interested too.
Right, right. And organic certification makes it usable for both, basically.
Exactly. It widens the market. And that ties back to the regulatory pressures we talked about.
Like the situation with certain chemical pesticides coming under review.
Precisely. Neonicotinoids were specifically mentioned. Big concerns about pollinators, bees especially, and other non-target species.
So what's happening there?
Well, the EPA is looking at restrictions, especially during times critical for bees. They're reviewing specific ones, imidacloprid, clothianidin, thiamethoxam, with decisions expected sometime in 2025.
So if those traditional tools become more restricted...
Farmers need alternatives that work and meet the regulations. Biologicals are positioned to fill that gap. It creates a clear need for effective, sustainable options.
Which depends on the science actually finding and developing those options.
Absolutely. And that's where some of the really cool science comes in, like using DNA sequencing to explore that microbial world.
Okay, tell me about that. How does DNA tech help find these beneficial microbes?
Well, it's similar to how scientists study the human microbiome, in our gut. They take a sample soil, in this case, and basically sequence all the DNA in it.
All of it, from all the different microbes.
Yep. They chop up the DNA into tiny pieces, sequence those snippets, and then use powerful computers to match those snippets against huge databases of known microbial genomes.
So you can figure out who's living in that soil sample, even if you can't grow them in a lab dish.
Exactly that. It lets researchers get a census really quickly and accurately of the microbial diversity, including identifying microbes that might have been completely unknown before.
That sounds incredibly powerful for discovery.
It is. And the bet companies are making is that somewhere within that vast, mostly unexplored microbial diversity lies the gold. The novel microbes, the unique biochemicals, the genetic pathways that will provide the next generation of sustainable tools for agriculture.
So pulling this all together from the sources, this shift towards biologicals, it's not just swapping product A for product B, it feels much more fundamental.
It really does seem to be. It's about rethinking our whole relationship with how we produce food, integrating it more closely with natural systems.
Aiming for productivity and environmental health hand in hand.
That seems to be the goal, yes. Long-term ecological health alongside feeding people.
This has been really illuminating, a deep dive into how agriculture is turning back to nature, but, powered by some seriously advanced science.
Driven by regulations, pushed by consumers.
Right, fueling that explosive market growth we talked about, and enabled by technologies like DNA sequencing that unlock nature's secrets.
It definitely paints a picture of a more integrated, maybe more holistic future for farming.
Yeah, and it leaves you thinking, considering that vast microbial world still largely unmapped right beneath our feet, what other incredible natural solutions are just waiting out there? What else could we find to truly transform how we feed ourselves sustainably?